Rich Miller, welcome to the bar.
Thank you, Gary. It's awesome to be here and reconnect with you, and that's quite a setup you have there.
Well, it is quite a setup, and it's been with me now for 8 weeks, even though all of the bars in Ireland are closed. So I've had to bring this all the way from Dublin City to my home in Wicklow, with the slight assistance of what's called a green screen. But don't tell anybody because.
Okay, your secret's safe with me.
So tell me, how are you?
I'm doing okay. The last couple of months have been really hectic, as with us, as with so many folks, but I'm doing good, and things are good.
And where is your holdup, as they say, and where is home right now?
Sure. I am in the Princeton, New Jersey area. We're in a town called Lawrenceville. It's right between Princeton and Trenton. So we're having the New Jersey experience, which is sort of, you got New York on one side and Philadelphia on the other, and and the shore about an hour away. So best of both worlds.
It's extraordinary, when I travel to New York and Manhattan and places, you go high enough up in the skyscraper and you can look left and right, and people say, there's Philadelphia and there's New Jersey, and they're on a clear day, of course. Um, but we've no real, in Ireland, as you know, you can drive three hours and you're in any place. So when we talk about scale, it's.
Yeah, well, I have loved visiting Ireland when I've been there, and I think the change of pace is really good. It's one of the things I love about travel, and frankly have missed a lot, in this strange new COVID-19 world that we're in right now.
And it's a nice lead in because you and I are both 22 years old, and we're not meant to, after a certain age, read manuals or be able to teach ourselves things. I'm
Right.
old, but what have you learned about yourself?
Quite a bit, actually. Um, the thing that I have learned is adaptability through all of this, and to just encounter each day on its own terms.
Hmm.
Like many people in business, I think I like to be organized. I like to plan things. We think about vision and strategy, 5-year plans, all of that. And I think what's been happening in the world lately really brings you right back to, what is today going to look like? Um, to get out of planning mode and strategy mode and just really interact with each day and the people in the task before you. Uh, and and I think one of the things that I realized is that it's real easy in business to let that get away from you and to become so focused in all of the thinking about what you're going to do next.
Hmm.
There's an old saying among church folk, which I am, which is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And I think that I think I take that to heart now in a different way.
It's really interesting because it just brings to my mind my father, when he got ill, he came home one day and he said, Gary, I think that doctor's more interested in the disease than the patient. And I've never, and now that I think about it, often we walk through life where we're more interested in the bits and bytes than the
Yeah,
why it matters.
yeah,
And actually, this has made us stop a bit. And even, you know, in fairness to yourself, you have a wonderful track record of unearthing both new, innovative, up and coming technologies and unearthing really interesting people. So I guess that's one of your fortes. You like to look around the corner.
I do. And that is really what the interesting bit about that is that with Data Center Frontier, this is my second website and really third in the data center industry, but at Data Center Knowledge, which many people are familiar with, which I founded, we talked about what's going on today, what's today's news, what's the hot stuff. With Data Center Frontier, we're really try to look around the corner and think about what's coming next, what's out on the horizon in the frontier, and how can I help, how can I serve the data center industry and helping them understand what's coming next and how to position for that. And when I started 2020 with a whole list of predictions, as we all do, and the pandemic has shifted so many things in ways which we couldn't have imagined, when you're an analyst, you're supposed to like be thinking about all this stuff. I didn't see this coming. I don't think that there were very many folks who did. And it's sort of forced us to reorder our thinking in some interesting ways. And to your point before, when you were talking about your dad, and one of the things that happened during all this is right in the sort of heart of the pandemic here in New Jersey, where it was bad. My dad's 90 and he had a stroke. And so he had to be in the hospital for a month in a situation where we couldn't visit him. We had to rely upon, nurses and doctors and communicating with hospital staff who were really busy in trying to deal with, incredible stresses every day. And so, it just kind of creates a different context for things. First of all, it was kind of stressful, but just, thinking about, the things I was worried about yesterday versus some of the things that come to the fore and that you occupy your day with now. It really does sort of reset your perspective a little bit. And I think it in ways that, are probably good for us.
I think if, whether it's a pandemic, which none of us have ever experienced, whether it's a car crash or whether it's an illness, it often brings out the best and the worst in people. And you can decide nearly often which path you want to take. But one of the things that I liked, and I go back to yourself, I remember the first time you ever met me. You said, well, you're way more graceful than this, but I'll say it in my paraphrase. Yeah, I get that, but can you give me some context? And it was one of the things that struck me was that you strove for context.
Right.
So unless you have the context, then a statement of fact is meaningless. And I guess
and I think that's really, what we as sort of like, information professionals can add. Because I think that's often what separates our ability to sort of say, oh, here's something that happened, into here's what it means, and here's what it means in the context of, my business and my plans.
Or pictures, I gave some talks recently and people were saying, I don't understand data, never mind data centers. And because you can't physically see it and you can't touch it and you can't this it, and you can talk about Zoom and you can talk about the rest. So I took out of my pocket a floppy disk, an actual floppy disk.
You still have one?
Yeah, I have. And I showed it and everybody said, oh, I remember that. Well, of a certain vintage. I remember them.
Right.
I used to put that into a hard piece, physical thing, and I closed it and I used to save. I says, well, that multiplied by 1 billion, trillion, quadrillion is in a data center, and they immediately got it. Oh, I see. So it's a floppy disk somewhere else.
Right, the stack of floppy disks that extends past the moon or whatever.
But,
that's one of the challenges that we have is because it does, blow your mind when you think about what that looks like now versus what we used to be able to do.
But I think Einstein was the one that said it, not in a derogatory way, but he said, I generally try and speak to people in a language that a 4-year-old would understand. And if they prove to be grown-ups, they'll ask me questions. Whereas I think there's sometimes a desire upon engineers to be the smartest dude sometimes in the room and build that moat around themselves. And be happy enough to know that he was perceived as the smartest man, but nobody in the room can remember a word or made any sense of what he said.
Well, one of the things that I learned really quickly in being a journalist is that sometimes just getting yourself out of the way and saying, explain it like I'm 5. That's a kid that I think my kids are into. But the other thing is, if you spend any time at all in this industry, you realize very quickly that you are very rarely the smartest person in the room. Sure. And one of the great opportunities is to sort of let smart people talk and try to learn from them. And this industry is just a phenomenal place to do that, because there are some wicked smart people, with their, intellectual bandwidth that really, you listen to them talk a little bit and it's like, okay, I'm going to keep listening instead of trying to say too much.
And one of the things that I noticed about talking to some of the actual co-location managed services guys on this series is that they often struggled to instill a sense of purpose with some of their staff because they were sort of invisible, like what we said. However, what the pandemic has done is, if there is any norm, and you and I would probably agree, we're in the current norm, not a new norm, just the current one, because that the guys and girls suddenly say, well, we keep Zoom running, or we keep Netflix running, and suddenly there's a bit more sense of purpose about
Mhm.
their role, whereas they don't communicate often as well, or their reputation may not be as well understood as to what that big box on the 48 acres does. It just is, it's like this insatiable monster that just gobbles up much needed renewable energy. And purpose kept coming up. Purpose. Their people have a purpose. They were identified as um, the first wave of essential workers. You know, all
Mhm.
that gave them a sense of purpose, which was great. And so, what we've got a couple of minutes, but what will you be writing about if you're thinking about your first or second new norm? So, within reason, all restrictions of movement are gone. What would be the thing you'd like to write about as a sort of full stop on this phase of where we've been?
I think it's about what changes will come out of this that are permanent, as opposed to all of the sort of transient things, that the sort of tactics that people are using to make their way because you don't have any other choices. Um, you know, in every crisis there are opportunities and the seeds of insight that you gain. You know, a lot of companies never thought that they could have their employees work from home, and that, you know, more than just a handful of them. And I think there's some interesting perspectives that folks are learning about what works in terms of working from home, uh, and uh, and in what cases do you need to be together to really you know, work together and collaborate. So I think that's one of the things that's interesting to me, is really to say, you know, what sticks and what's going to change in a more permanent way, and how does the data center industry and the rest of the business world pursue that?
Mm,
Because we really have been the lifeline for so many businesses and schools
mm.
and healthcare and government. You know, and people, as you said, people do get that now.
A lot more than maybe beforehand, for sure. Do you have 3 words?
I do. So these are my 3 words: now, humility, and gratitude. Um, Now, because as I think I mentioned before, I think one of the things I've really learned is to live in the moment, and to be very focused on, you know, to be mindful of where I am at. Humility, because, you know, the pandemic teaches you that you know less than you thought you knew. And gratitude, because I'm learning really that I very much have to spend each day being grateful for all the things that we have, the people that we have in our lives. You know, things like the ability to travel that we took for granted, and now I think we think about in a different way. We kid about the before time and the now. Uh, but you know, I think when we come back to those experiences, I can't but help but think that we're going to embrace them and appreciate them in maybe a little bit different way from having to have you know, gone through this experience.
Yes, and I think it's called empathy. There was a social empathy I was taught as a young boy. It was something, I think they call it emotional intelligence or something now. And the guy was very blunt. He said it's very hard to understand what it's like to have a badly fractured arm unless you've had a badly fractured arm.
Mm.
Empathy. You now can empathize when people talk about the inconvenience of, and hopefully that filter will last a while. Rich Miller, as always, you're a lovely person. You're an interesting person. And you smile, which is great. You do, you smile. And it's,
I I am having that I'm trying to have a good time and find this industry is a blast, and I love meeting and getting to talk with people like you. So what's not to smile about?
Well, thank you so much. And it's been a blast, and stay safe, and I'll see you, and hopefully we'll be together very soon.
You too, Gary. I look forward to it.
Thank you so much.